Please remember to subscribe and click the notification bell below. And please do check out my main channel, Great Art Explained, with the latest film about Dorothea Tanning. And if you want to support this channel and get exclusive content, the link to my Patreon is also below. As internet users, we all understand the expression, going down a rabbit hole, which comes from the much-loved book Alice's Adventures in Wonderland.
Down, down, down. Would the fall never come to an end? I wonder how many miles I've fallen by this time, said Alice.
The book famously begins when the main character Alice follows a white rabbit underground and finds herself going deeper and deeper into a strange world. Somewhere in which normal social rules and even the laws of physics are suspended. The author of Alice in Wonderland, Lewis Carroll, was really called Charles Dodson, a professor of mathematics specialising in geometry and logic. As Dodson, he was a conservative mathematician who lived in a stable world of proof and logic, a world of rationality where parallel lines could never meet. As Lewis Carroll, he stepped across those boundaries. At first glance, it appears that with Alice in Wonderland, he created one of the most illogical books ever written. But this is not the case. Instead, Carroll used his book to explore the limits of logic, drawing on mathematical conundrums and strategy games to create a wonderful topsy-turvy world full of playful puzzles, a world populated by some of the most memorable characters in all of literature. Lewis Carroll was the pen name of Charles Dodson, mathematician, poet, satirist, inventor, photographer and writer, a Victorian Renaissance man. His pen name is his first two real names, Charles Ludwig, translated into Latin as Carolus Ludovicus, reversed and then translated back into English as Lewis Carroll. It is fitting that the name on the front of Alice in Wonderland should conceal some kind of wordplay. Dodson was born in 1832 in Cheshire, one of 11 children born to parents who were religious conservatives and first cousins. As a very young child, he suffered a fever that made him deaf in one ear, and then a severe attack of whooping cough left him with a chronically weak chest. He also spoke with a debilitating stutter his whole life, and writing and storytelling became a way to escape from his physical ailments and immerse himself in alternate worlds. As a boy, he showed an early talent for maths and would go on to study at Christ Church College, Oxford, where he would work for his entire professional career. Dodson's work as a mathematician was, despite what you might think, completely compatible with his work as a writer, and in fact, it was integral to it. As a professor of maths, he was a man who spent his days absorbed in logical puzzles. And it was this flair for making and solving problems that would define this brilliant writer and become the essence of Alice in Wonderland.
Contrariwise, said Tweedledee. If it was so, it might be. And if it were so, it would be. But as it isn't, it ain't. That's logic.
The Alice books are filled with tricks of logic and playful paradoxes. Dodson loved puzzles, and he invented and published a popular word puzzle in Vanity Fair magazine, in which he had a regular column. It is called the word ladder, where you have to get from one word to another, changing one letter at a time, while still making a word each time. He also created many mathematical puzzles, including this one.
If 100 men could build a wall 100 feet long in 10 days, working 10 hours a day, how long would it take 10,000 men to build a wall 10 feet long?
The answer can be calculated straightforwardly, using the unitary method. However, Dodson would be quick to point out that 10,000 men cannot fit around a 10-foot wall. The problem demonstrates how logic can lead us astray, and how the right thinking might give us the wrong answers. The fallibility of human reasoning lies at the heart of Alice in Wonderland, and in particular, Carroll was reflecting humorously on the folly and limitations of his own discipline, mathematics. There are several direct references to mathematics in the books, such as when the White Queen decides to test Alice's maths.
"Can you do addition?" the White Queen asked. "What's 1 and 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 1? "I don't know," said Alice. "I lost count." "She can't do addition," the Red Queen interrupted.
And again, when the Mock Turtle tells Alice about his education.
"There are the different branches of arithmetic: ambition, distraction, uglification, and derision."
Some of Carroll's characters, far from being adept in maths, are described as being rather afraid of it, like the Duchess, who says,
"I never could abide figures."
Or Humpty Dumpty, who gets nervous when subtracting 1 from 365 to find out how many unbirthdays he has. Even in the opening chapter, Alice thinks about how she might calculate her rate of travel as she falls down the rabbit hole.
Either the well was very deep, or she fell very slowly, for she had plenty of time as she went down to look about, and to wonder what was going to happen next.
And she also shows an aptitude for figures when she speculates about how far she might have fallen.
"I must be getting somewhere near the centre of the earth. Let me see, that would be 4,000 miles down."
She is surprisingly accurate, with the real figure being 3,981.25 miles. A character who may not quite have the right answers is the Knight, a daydreaming inventor who Carroll uses to produce a playful satire of deductive reasoning, when he explains to Alice his new method of getting over a gate.
"You see, I said to myself, the only difficulty is with the feet. The head is high enough already. Now, first I put my head on top of the gate, then the head's high enough, then I stand on my head, and the feet are high enough. Then I'm over. You see?"
Alice, when she hears this, understood immediately that logical reasoning is nothing without common sense.
"Don't you think it would be rather hard?" said Alice.
Suffice to say that one critic was absolutely right when they said,
"Only a mathematician could have written the Alice books."
Among the many interests of Charles Dodson was a passion for the relatively new invention of photography. Dodson would go on to become a highly skilled amateur photographer, making technical advancements in lighting techniques and experimenting with double exposures to create surreal and dreamlike images. He took pictures of eminent artists of his age, including Tennyson and the pre-Raphaelite Dante Gabriel Rossetti, with his sister, the poet Christina. The majority of his photographs, however, were of children, often inspired by famous paintings. In particular, he photographed one girl. This is the real-life girl who would inspire one of the greatest stories in the English language and catapult Dodson to unexpected fame. This is Alice Liddell. Alice was one of the children of Henry Liddell, Dean of Christ Church College in Oxford. Dodson would often take Alice and her siblings on boat trips down the river in Oxford, and on one of these trips he began telling a story with imaginative characters and lots of twists and turns, which would later become Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. It was Alice Liddell herself who encouraged Carroll to publish the stories. The Alice we meet in the books is brave, curious, sensitive, and occasionally bossy.
"Hold your tongue," said the Queen, turning purple. "I won't," said Alice.
In the context of Victorian society, where children were generally expected to be seen and not heard, Alice is a heroine who is bracingly different. She is a rule breaker, fiercely unique and brilliantly rebellious. It was in Carroll's books that we first saw children as individuals, with lives of their own, and they remain a tale of how we view childhood. Alice, the first female lead in children's literature, challenges the upright morals and the stuffy atmosphere of Victorian England, and is a timeless heroine because of that. She is a girl who represents a bold and youthful alternative to the boring, logical, and mundane world of adulthood.
I think now my adventures overseas will be almost as interesting as my adventures underground were.
Well, I've often seen a cat without a grin, but a grin without a cat. It's the most curious thing I ever saw in my life.
Many think of the Alice books as essentially children's books, but they are also profound texts which ask the kind of deep questions which occupied thinkers like Plato and Descartes. Questions such as, how do we know what is real, and how can we prove what we think is true? These are the sort of questions running through Alice's mind when she falls down the rabbit hole.
How queer everything is today. And yesterday things went on just as usual. I wonder if I've been changed in the night. Let me think. Was I the same when I got up this morning? I almost think I can remember feeling a little different. But if I'm not the same, the next question is, who in the world am I? Oh, that's the greatest puzzle.
Dodson used Alice in Wonderland to think through essential philosophical questions in a light-hearted manner, while experimenting with the frontiers of language and probing the limits of logic.
Alice laughed. There's no use trying, she said. One can't believe impossible things. I dare say you haven't had much practice, said the Queen. Why, sometimes I've believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast.
At the Mad Hatter's Tea Party, Carol encourages us to try our hand at imagining impossible things, such as when the Dormouse is telling a story about 3 sisters learning how to draw.
They drew all manner of things, everything beginning with an M, such as mousetraps and the moon and memory and muchness. Did you ever see such a thing as a drawing of a muchness?
W.H. Auden wrote of the 2 Wonderland books, one of the most important and powerful characters is not a person, but the English language. Carol was interested in when and why sentences make sense or don't make sense, and explored the systems that make meaning and underlie language. Reading and writing becomes reeling and writhing. A teacherly turtle becomes a tortoise because he taught us. Misunderstandings abound.
You should say what you mean, the March Hare went on. I do, Alice hastily replied. At least, I mean what I say. That's the same thing, you know. Not the same thing a bit. Why, you might just as well say that I see what I eat is the same thing as I eat what I see.
Language rules are endlessly twisted to suit the whims of anyone speaking, as when Humpty Dumpty declares,
When I use a word, it means just what I choose it to mean. Neither more nor less.
But it wasn't just language Carol was interested in. He also cast aside the laws of physics. In Through the Looking Glass, written 6 years later, Alice steps through a mirror into a world which is a reverse of her own. The book, which Carol structured abstractly as a chess problem, plays with the concept of a world running backwards. The Red Queen explains that in the world on the other side of the looking glass, people have to run very fast just to stay where they are, and she later explains that the sequence of cause and effect is reversed in her kingdom.
There's the king's messenger, she says. He's in prison now being punished, and the trial doesn't even begin till next Wednesday, and of course the crime comes last of all.
A world in which criminals are punished before their crimes are committed would have echoes in Franz Kafka and be explored later in darker fiction by George Orwell and Philip K. Dick. Indeed, despite its whimsical elements, there are themes of darkness or melancholy in the Alice books.
Off with his head! Off with her head!
Off with her head!
Off with her head!
The Queen of Hearts, for instance, constantly calls for executions, while the character of the Duchess is often suddenly rude and dismissive.
Explanations take such a dreadful amount of time.
As a result, there is an atmosphere of perilous unpredictability, with all around them on edge. Difficult topics are addressed by Carol, such as mortality, rationality, and the certainties of regular life. No other book before had told children quite so explicitly,
We're all mad here. I'm mad. You're mad.
Moreover, there is something extremely disconcerting about the way Alice is encouraged so frequently to doubt who she is, As a result, she struggles to maintain a stable sense of self.
"Who are you?" asks the caterpillar of Alice. "Explain yourself." "I can't explain myself, I'm afraid, sir," said Alice, "because I'm not myself, you see."
No, I don't see.
In an era when people with mental illness and often the disabled were locked away from society, Carroll takes a more enlightened view, perhaps because of his own health issues. In Alice in Wonderland, being different is seen as positive and liberating, allowing characters to operate without the constraints of societal norms. Carroll's novel might even make us feel like we are going mad ourselves, and encourages us to explore unusual and possibly irrational ways of thinking, revealing a world of dreams and subconscious yet to be fully explored in real life. This is the anxiety that runs through Carroll's books.
"You know very well you're not real," Tweedledum tells Alice. "I am real," she replies, and begins to cry. "You won't make yourself a bit realer by crying," Tweedledee remarked.
For a book that began life as a story made up by a mathematics teacher on a boating trip in Oxford, Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland would go on to have an enormous global cultural impact, particularly in the arts. The Surrealists, drawing on Freud's theories of the unconscious, had a deep admiration for Carroll and how he combined reality and fantasy, the uncanny and the illogical. Salvador Dali produced many works around ideas and concepts in the book, as did René Magritte, Max Ernst, and Dorothea Tanning. Later, the artist Peter Blake featured Carroll in his artwork for the Beatles, and Yayoi Kusama illustrated an edition with her trademark polka dots. Several generations of writers and philosophers have taken the Alice book's focus on language and perception extremely seriously. James Joyce cited the book as an inspiration, as did Henry Miller and Philip Pullman. In 1903, the first Alice in Wonderland film was released. Only 9 minutes long, it featured innovative trick shots, which caused a sensation. Lewis Carroll, the innovator, would have loved this, but sadly had died 5 years before. Since then, the book has been filmed over 40 times in dozens of languages, as live action, as cartoons, and in stop action. There have been at least 3 operas, a ballet or 2, several plays, computer games, graphic novels, and Broadway musicals. Lewis Carroll's books are timeless and relevant. Among other things, they encourage us to relish imagination. They teach us the virtues of curiosity, laughter, and of embracing adventures, and just plain weirdness. As Virginia Woolf so perfectly summed it up,
"They are the only books in which we become children."